Recently, I moved into a new apartment, which I thought was the path of least resistance. And there's more to that story, like there always is. However, I don't have privacy at this new place because I constantly hear a noise from above. My neighbor is very kind, and I know just living his life. I've done focus wheels, emotional scales, and all of that, but it's so distracting, and this might sound dramatic, but honestly, I feel devastated. Then those thoughts roll into, I'll never be able to afford a home where I can have full privacy to myself. If there's something specific you can help me with, it would be that. Remember that how you feel is an indication of what you've got going on vibrationally. And it doesn't really matter why. You've just got it going on vibrationally. Therefore, you will attract mutual things like it. Now we want to go back to the key point. You said you feel devastated. Now, devastated is a pretty strong word and a very strong emotion to describe response to not feeling privacy or noise from a nice person upstairs. Must be more than that. You who are listening in may seem is obvious. And then our writer tells us, then those thoughts roll into, I'll never be able to afford a home where I can have full privacy to myself. Now that's the part that's devastating. It's that feeling of not being in control of your own life experience and then having to put up with less than. Esther has a really beautiful house here. It's in a part of the world that people want to live. And there's no one living upstairs or downstairs. Nothing like that is detracting from privacy. But we want to tell you a little bit about it because she chose this house deliberately. It rang her bells in so many ways. But it's not in a quiet place like the house where she lived before. It's in a busier part of the environment. And right across the street, there is a bird sanctuary where big birds at feeding time go crazy for about an hour and squawk and squeal. Now, it could seem like it's invading Esther's privacy, but it's not bothering her. And then frequently, people on motorcycles go by because at the foot of the hill that she lives on is a roadway where trucks and motorcycles go by. And off just a little bit in the distance is a train track where all hours of the day and night trains go by and sometimes blow their horns and always clackety, clackety, clack down the track. Trackety, trackety, track. And then we must tell you, there's a fire station close by. And while there are not a lot of reasons for those vehicles to leave the firehouse, they leave every day 2 or 3 times. And they do this chirping thing where, not with their siren on, but a sort of chirp, chirp, chirp. Esther learned that when she put a new gate in Texas, that the fire truck wants to be able to chirp, not run its full siren, but just chirp its siren. And that opens the gates that have those things installed. So most housing developments and gates around the way can be opened by these emergency vehicles who can chirp their sirens. So Esther's hearing those chirpings. And then there are big birds that fly around here and land on her roof and call to each other. And so this is not noise that is coming from a nice man upstairs. This is noise coming from all around Esther's environment. But it doesn't feel devastating to Esther because there's not that underlying thing that is the reason for the feeling of devastation that you are just pinning to not feeling that you have privacy. When you live in a world with other co-creators, you don't have privacy. You don't have energy privacy. You don't have thought privacy. You don't have privacy in the sense that you have an environment where there is no interruption or distraction. And so we want to suggest to you that you're barking up the wrong tree. Oh, there's dogs barking too. You're barking up the wrong tree when you are looking for an environment that is free of distraction. That will never be in the environment that you, deliberate, co-creative beings, are choosing. So this conversation is about what's really going on that I am then explaining in some other way, which leads us to what we think is a really good conversation or maybe theme for this time that we are together. We'll come back to it from time to time as we make our way through what you've written. And this is the subject of, it's law of attraction, we know you get that. And it's mutuality, we know that that makes some sense to you. And in your experience, there is response to life. That's a normal thing. Wonderful things make you feel wonderful, and less wonderful things seem to be the cause of why you feel less wonderful. But what we want to point out to you is that the only thing that is unpleasant to you is your own split energy. And your own split energy, we know. Some of you are thinking, blah, blah, blah. Abraham, that again. Yes, that again, because it's the only thing that is hindering you. It's the only thing that makes you feel devastated or unpleasant in any way. It is the thing that keeps you from experiencing the things that you want to live. But we want to clarify it in a way that you may not be thinking about. Yes, wanting something and doubting it, that's split energy. That's becoming pretty obvious to you. What to do about that is less obvious, but you're making headway. All of you are on that subject. But there's another form of split energy that is really common within you. We talked about it last week and the week before a little bit, but we really want to nail it down here for you in a way that you can really feel it. And that is when you feel negative emotion. This is the number one thing, the most predominant thing, the thing that you do more often than all of the other things put together, and that thing that is keeping you from the living happier that you are reaching for. And that is when you feel negative emotion, at every level of your being, you know you do not want that. Many of the things that you fear are because you fear the devastating feeling that you would feel if such and such were to happen to you. Now, stay with us just a little bit. We want you to understand it in a lighter way than that. When you feel negative emotion, you have a tendency, you can get over it, but you have a tendency, as you feel the negative emotion, to then justify it, rationalize it, or explain it to yourself or to others, in a sort of defensive stance of wanting to be right, even wanting to be right in the negative emotion that you're feeling. Well, of course you're right. In other words, of course you're right in the justification of the negative emotion. If you were to explain it to a friend or a lot of people or a panel that was listening for ways to improve society, many would side with you. The rightness and the wrongness of the thought is not the question here. We just want you to understand that in your incessant and failing and flawed premise attempt to justify your negative emotion, you hold yourself in a pattern of something that we want to then couple with the phrase, argue for your limitation. In other words, the only limitation that you have, the only limitation is pinching off your own stream of well-being. Your only limitation when it's happening is accompanied by negative emotion. So if you can somehow just put all of that together in your mind and just make some affirmative decisions, some decisions that go something like, okay, I'm going to do my best to not argue for my limitations so much. And I sort of kind of get it that Abraham means by arguing for my limitation that I'm justifying this negative emotion that I hold, which is just amplifying it, practicing it longer, setting up more momentum, and causing me to attract more of it. In other words, if you can just put these things together, and therefore let your dominant intention be to feel as good as you can feel moment by moment. In other words, self-soothing is what we're encouraging you to reach for. Self-soothing. So, for example, if Esther can hear the bird squawking and she's trying to record something, she can self-soothe by saying, the birds don't always squawk. I can have better timing than this. And they eat at just about the same time every day. When the motorcycle goes by and interrupts the silence that she wants, she can self-soothe by saying, the motorcycle is infrequent, and I can pause for the time that it passes. And by the way, I like the fun that I think that guy or gal on that motorcycle is having as they are speeding by. In other words, self-soothe. But when you put yourself in a box like you did here, by saying, I'll never be able to afford a home where I can. Affording a home has nothing to do with the full privacy. It has nothing to do with the absence of negative emotion. It's just you arguing for limitations and making it worse. Self-soothing is what you're wanting to do. He's a nice man upstairs, and he's just living his life. And maybe you don't want to hear him stomping around. Someone else wrote in, it's like a herd of elephants. It sounds like they have 20 children running around. And there aren't any children running around. It's just him stomping around. You live in a world with a lot of others. And friends, we really want you to know, you think it is their noise infiltration that is bothering you. But what it really is their differences vibrationally that you are then giving your attention to, that is then causing you to disallow the perspective that your inner being holds in this same important and lovely, we know you want to argue with us, moment in time. You'll hear more, because there is quite a bit of this going around. Maybe because you're staying home more. Maybe because you're becoming more sensitive to your emotions. But we promise you, isolation and privacy, living on the quietest street in the quietest place in the whole world, is not what you're looking for. There will be other things that will bother you there.